I actually intend on covering cultural things much later in this channel's history, but since Arcane just came out and it has one of the best uses in symbolism I have seen since Dante, I just figured I'd talk about it right away and just do an off-topic dedicated to it. First things out of the way, this is not an exhaustive review or anything, this is just me pointing out cool details, kind of the working with themes, the symbolism in the show. I guess also as a kind of, let's say, introduction, of course, it has a lot of references and is really based on A Tale of Two Cities. You have the two cities, of course, in the original book, it's London and Paris, and here Piltover and Zorn actually kind of together are more or less one city, but they're kind of a mix between London and Paris. So, for example, they have this Art Deco style going on, but then you also see kind of the London in the Victorian era vibes in there. Caitlin speaks with a British accent, all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a meshing between London and Paris at the during the 19th and very early 20th century. So, but I don't really want to cover that. I guess something that's also kind of noteworthy, of course, would be there's also one girl who holds the whole thing together, the Golden Strand, but of course, in this case, it's kind of an inversion of the way Tale of Two Cities does it, and you also have a lot of water symbolism, which we will get into later. So the show opens on a bridge, and I already like that scene immensely well, because you have these two sisters on a bridge, and of course it sets up the two themes. With the show, it gives a continuity between the beginning and the end, the alpha and the omega, which of course is very important if you want to craft like high-level storytelling. And of course, the themes are family, the two sisters on the bridge, and later Vanda will take them in on the bridge to become their new adoptive father, because their other family lies there dead. So you have the kind of family, the dynamics between father and daughter, missing parents or troubles with parents in a sense, and the sisters. And the other one, the other dynamic, of course, you have the other symbol that is very obvious there in a sense, is the crossing of bridges, which of course you have with Jace and Victor crossing the bridge between magic and science, and what that entails, how that is a sign of peace, but also of danger, all those kinds of ideas. So then there's a lot of, all of the show scenes are good, but again, I'm just focusing on certain highlights. So the next highlight I noted was the escape into the gutter. So here we're coming out of a chase scene with the police. These four children are running away from the police. And then they have this entrance to the gutter, this maw, this kind of tunnel they go through. And after they go through this tunnel, they're safe. And the tension is kind of out of the scene. And with this, you immediately know, it immediately symbolizes that these are children of the gutter. Because, of course, normally you would be unsafe in the gutter. You would go away from a pile of garbage. But in their situation, they run away from the normal city and they come at rest in the trash, in the garbage. And you really know, okay, these are garbage children in a sense. And that is when it completely hits you, if in case you didn't realize it before, when they were kind of stealing to get their bread, that these are kind of, gutter ranchers, children from the ghettos. So this is also, I think, during the end of the first episode. You have the mouse eating the cat. So Silco, of course, has Singed kind of prepare one of the first working versions of Shimmer. And the way they showcase it is that they put a cat into, well, I guess it's not a mouse, it's a rat, but whatever. They put a cat into a cage with a rat, and of course the normal thing would be that the cat would eat the rat, but the rat eats Shimmer, turns into a monster and attacks the cat. And of course you have this this inversion, this abomination of the rat becoming more powerful than its predator, so it's an affront against nature. This is immediately established, Shimmer being something that is unnatural. But you also have the dynamics of Piltover and Zorn, because of course Piltover is the, let's say, the predator, the apex animal in their relationship. It is where the lions live in a sense. And then you have Zorn, which is kind of the city that is suffering under Piltover, and of course this is what Silco wants to invert, or wants to get away from. He wants Zorn to take revenge on Piltover, so he wants the rat to take revenge on the cat. And he does this symbolically here in that scene. So, another thing that's also part of that whole scene is Silco loving the deep sea creatures, and of course, this is where the water symbolism starts to come in again. Also, just a throwback and a parallel to A Tale of Two Cities, where the water also symbolizes the chaos, and the chaos rising up, the kind of the revolutionaries crawling out from the under, like from the gutters, from the city, under the city, from the underground, and flooding the civilization and tearing it all to pieces. And here we have Silco being happy underwater and admiring the magnificent creatures underwater, which other people only see as monsters. So he really is in his element here. He is in the city of chaos, he is in the Undercity, but this is also his element. This is the thing he loves, which is actually something the show never did, which the show could have done, and that is they could have had him win. And of course, they couldn't have had him win because League of Legends has an established lore and everything, but they could have had him win and realize that the place he wanted to be is actually still in the Undercity, and they actually have a kind of a dynamic with that later with him and the Chem Barons, where the Chem Barons already start behaving kind of like they're Piltorians, and he hates that. So he really, like, the reality of his character is that he doesn't really want things to change, he just thinks he does. But we may come to that later again. So in the beginning of the second episode, you have Jace being rescued by a mage, and we have this short scene, which is of course laden with a lot of symbolism. It's almost akin to it's kind of a trippy scene, so kind of a symbolism overload. There's a lot of things to say here. The imagery is usually primordial, so you don't really, or you would call it archetypal, so you wouldn't really necessarily want to explain it because you would always just reduce it. But of course, you have the scene where the mage kind of opens his hand and the world appears spinning in the hand of the mage, and then the world turns into the iris of an eye, and you get a lot of ideas of the mage being kind of in control of reality at this point, which is a very nice play with the mage aesthetic. Of course, mage aesthetic and those kind of things, they're always, in a sense, dangerous. But if you kind of know about Riot's lore, then you know that they actually do have a good idea of how to handle the whole mage thing, and that they do see mages as powerful on the one hand, but also immoral creatures at the other hand, or amoral creatures at the other hand, who can use this power for good and for bad. And of course, you have the world turning into the iris, kind of the external and the internal, very classical mage symbology, as above, so below. The show features tarot cards. I will talk about that a bit later. So I think that's very much intended to kind of give this, of course, the version of the mage card, where he also points to the heaven and to the earth, kind of connecting them, in this case, the external world and the interior world. But again, it's a lot of very primordial, very archetypal symbolism, so there are other ways of approaching it which also work, and you shouldn't, or one shouldn't, try to reduce it necessarily. Then we have I think we will do this here, is Silco's baptismal symbolism. Again, he also water, and he is, of course, kind of being baptized into his Nietzschean philosophy. It uses baptismal symbolism really well in that it knows how to kind of, let's say, misuse baptism without being sacrilegious. So it doesn't make fun of baptism, it rather shows that the symbolic side of baptism is always true in a sense, and it shows how an improper baptism can lead to an improper rebirth. And here we have, of course, Silco being baptized more or less against his will by force, and then instead of where the baptism usually is the child being put into holy water, or even the adult being put into holy water, and being cleansed by the water, and then rising out of the water, where he kind of leaves all of his dirt in the water basically, and comes out of that refreshed and of course part of the church. Here we have an inversion of that. The water is of course filthy and toxic, and with the open wound, instead of Silco leaving his filth in the water, the filth of the water enters him and builds him anew, and goes into his left eye. And we will cover the left and the right eye later. But yeah, the left eye also has to be it is naturally dead, and it has to be enforced unnaturally. It has to be kept alive by pincers of shimmer. We see that later in the series, which is also, I think we will come to that during the end of this kind of pro forma analysis. There's also a lot of cosmic, or I guess you would call it Zodiac symbolism, where Jace and Victor crack open the secrets of the Arcane Stone. And of course, the Arcane Stone is kind of the faucet of magic, and magic very much has this mystical character. And so you have this room that opens up to them, this universe that opens up to him. And behind on the universe, you can see these kind of zodiac signs forming. And this is, of course, let's say, using symbolism from a real world, from the history of magic and magicians in our real world, which has always connected the cosmos to reality. This is, of course, how magic starts, kind of in the Bronze Age, as magicians connecting cosmos to reality to create simple things like measures of time and stuff like that, but to also engage in these deeper mystical endeavors to try to solve and unveil the mysteries of the universe. And you have something like this here going on as well, kind of the stone being a representation of mystery, of power, and you see kind of Jace doing a certain rhythm, so kind of unlocking, doing a certain rhythm with a dial, kind of unlocking the hidden potential in the stone, and then projecting the stone, projecting the entire universe out and making them float, putting them into a certain kind of appreciatory limbo as they float through the room. Okay, so now we are in the second batch, and the second batch is the one that is the densest when it comes to symbolism. And it immediately opens with a very common symbol, and that is the Magician's Tower. The Magician's Tower is a symbol that appears quite often, especially in older storytelling. One of the most prominent examples is, of course, the Tower in the Eye of Sauron, or in the same trilogy, the Tower of Saruman. And it always has this connotation that we also find in the Bible, the Tower of Babel, kind of the magician having a massive device which enables him to access God in a, let's say, unclean way. So we also have this in, let's say, real life lore, for example, going back to the magicians, the Obelisk. The Obelisk is kind of this item with which the magician kind of pierces the heavens, and of course penetrates kind of the stars in an almost violation of the mystical blanket that the night puts over the world. And we have this in the Magician's Tower, again, very typical symbolism, but it's usually on the, let's say, what you would call the evil side. And the reason for that is that this is in a font. So, for example, when you look at the Tower of Babel, of course, the people are building this tower, and it is in a font to, I guess, when I said real life lore, the Tower of Babel is also in there. But I didn't think of that because it's likely that the Tower of Babel wasn't actually a tower. There's a lot of speculation there was a ziggurat, but the tower symbolism still is important. And when you look at the Tower of Babel, of course, the people are building up into the heavens and kind of trying to violate God, as the magicians do with the night sky. But of course, they kind of try to get to the heart of what is behind the night sky, in a sense. And for that, God casts them down. And similarly, the Magician's Tower is usually a symbol of an unnatural use of power, of a kind of power concentrated under the magician that he can use to his own agency without any snapback from it or anything. So it's usually a symbol of kind of evil, might, and destruction. Again, perfectly illustrated in the Eye of Sauron, in the Tower of Sauron, in the Lord of the Rings. So when I saw this, I thought, okay, damn, because as far as I knew, that thing still stands in the lore where the game, because this is of course before the, let's say, the main lore of the game, and I think that thing still stands. So I'm like, I don't know. I want to like Piltover, and of course Piltover in many ways is also the shining city, but the Magician's Tower kind of it has to bring about doom and destruction. And I don't think they will do that. So I wanted to put a minus there on the symbolism. I was like, okay, yeah, they just put a Magician's Tower in there, and they're not going to fire the Chekhov's gun that they have set on the wall. And boy, was I wrong. But we're getting to that when we're getting to the finale. So next one, a pretty simple one is, but a cute one is when the or what are they called? The firelights are going down in the ship and are exploring the ship. You see a swing, and the swing is kind of swinging back and forth. And then you see at the bottom of it, boom, and that is what introduces Jinx, now that she has become the Jinx persona that we know. And again, this is kind of the swing is a very nice piece of symbolism for her, because she is swinging between, is kind of in this, or in German, swinging even is kind of the term of faltering, of oscillating between two positions. She is very unstable, and she also is very childish, which of course it's a child's toy, so it's a very, very good symbol there, very neat one. The small swing with a boom on it, and we immediately know that this is Jinx's, because we know the kind of Jinx writing that she already put on all the bombs she made so far. So it immediately connects. So the torch symbol I have discussed in my second video on this channel, and the torch is used very well in the series. They use it in its legacy kind. You remember me talking about torches being handed down generations to generation, and this is what it kind of uses, the family or the torch as what connects you to your family, kind of your legacy, your inheritance, all that kind of stuff. And the first time we have a torch appearing is when Jinx sees the fake Y. And she, of course, holds a torch in her hand, and as Jinx sees the fake Y, she drops the torch. So she drops the link between the generations, between the little and the bigger sister, and the flame burns the ship, and it hurts Jinx. So her legacy, her torch, her family leading down to her, all of that is hurting her in a very nice piece of symbolism. What we also see in this episode is Jinx living on a rotor blade above the abyss. Of course, also very obvious symbolism. She is very close to the abyss, and she's kind of spinning around that. I mean, the rotor blade never spins, but it has this, of course, the spinning aspect to it, and it's drawn and put in a way in which it spins. And this is actually, as far as I know, this artwork existed way before the series, but that could have also been the series already planning this artwork and then releasing it, because they've been working on it for 6 years. So I don't know which came first, but it's definitely a great use of symbolism to kind of show Jinx's character. So let's see what else I noted down. So in a later scene, we see that Jinx can't overcome her sister, and the way this is made is that she revisits an old machine. So this is a symbol that the show has set up for itself. This is not an established symbol. This is something that the show created. And she revisits the punching machine, and she punches, and it has the scoreboard which goes up and up and up and up. But as she has finished her punching session, her sister's score is still above her, which means that she can't get over her sister. And of course, again, the dual meaning, she can't get over her literally on the scale, and she can't get over her figuratively in her own mind. And it's also nice that kind of the POW symbolizes both her old and her new persona. For her old persona, it's just POW, so just her name. And for the new persona, it's kind of POW, kind of the slap from a comic book. So again, beautiful symbolism there to show that Jinx can't overcome her sister without. I mean, it's shown quite a lot, but this is kind of a nice scene that really entrenches this. Another beautifully done scene, very well communicated, is the intrigue in the opera, and this is of course covered by a play with a violinist playing in a storm. So you have this beautiful work of solo art with all the storm around him. Of course, the storm being, and again, this is more archaic. This is more archetypal. So what I'm saying here is not, let's say, the only ways you can look at this, but of course, the storm being, for example, the other senators, which are all kind of packing together and being angry and having this energy to them, and then Jace and Mel playing the violin in between and kind of bringing in this harmony and that way overcoming the storm. Another way that can also be seen is you see Heimerdinger being completely entrenched in the show and clapping and enjoying it, whilst around him all the plans are going on that will lead to his undoing. So again, you would have the kind of the virtuoso, the innocent one in the eye of the storm, which will overcome him. Again, this is more. This is deeper. Works on more levels. There's nothing that really, let's say, cuts each other out here. Okay, so now we come to two scenes, almost back to back, which are a bit contentious. But this was also the moment where Arcane went from, oh wow, this is really good cinema, to this actually, especially in the second part, this actually did things that I've never seen before, and just went above. Okay, so the two scenes are the brothel scene and after it, but disconnected from it actually, also the sex scene. And yeah, again, these would have been ways in which you would expect Netflix to kind of screw the whole thing up, but to my surprise, they didn't screw up in either case. So let's talk about it. So the brothel scene, okay, first let's take the obvious, let's say, misgiving in the scene, and that is that they put a yodel into fetish wear, and I think it's played as a joke. It's not funny. Maybe it's also, let's say, a rhyme, an imp and a gimp, but it's just weird. Kind of, I think most people who saw it were kind of grossed out by it. Shouldn't have been there. Also, I mean, the scene does everything really well. They could have gone a bit further in kind of covering scandalous parts with, let's say, parts in the room, especially the scene we're going to discuss in a bit, where we see Caitlyn interact with one of the prostitutes, and they actually have ferns in the room, so they could have covered the prostitute more to kind of make it less scandalous, but I'm kind of already surprised that, frankly, that Netflix didn't put any nudity in there. And of course, there would have been chances to make this into a really good scene, because usually what happens with these scenes is that they become perversions, but it seems to me that this scene is almost unperverted, again, except for these two parts. The one where they could have covered the scandalous parts more, and the part where they should have just taken out the imp and the gimp. So the brothel scene starts with Vi and Caitlyn entering the brothel, and you have an exchange between the two. And the scene, I guess this also bears mentioning, apparently one of the writers went online and said that they wanted to write Caitlyn and Vi as having kind of lesbian affections for one another, so same-sex attraction. And it is there if you wanted to be there, but they also mention in the notes or in their commentary that the show almost took it out. I think what happened instead is that they kind of had this or made every scene make sense in another way. And the interesting thing is that let's say the second way actually works much better story-wise. So I will focus on the second part, even though apparently one of the writers really did intend for there to be kind of same-sex attraction within the show. But I will only focus on the second part. So Vi here tells Caitlyn that she expects everybody to give her what she wants, but that's not how the world works. She has to pretend as if you have things that others don't in order to get them to do what you do. And of course, the dynamic here being that this is what Vi is doing to Caitlyn at this very moment. She is pretending to have what Caitlyn wants, but she really just uses Caitlyn to get out of prison and to get back to her sister. And the other dynamic that's also important for the scene is that so far Caitlyn has been seen by Vi as kind of an idiot, an incompetent person, and she is now in this undercity, and she is completely out of her element and completely shocked. And of course, this is also what we see once she enters the brothel. She's overwhelmed by the situation and she's vulnerable. And Vi basically tells her to stick it up, to stick it out, and to start pretending that she is a prostitute, because that way people desire her and want to elicit, of course, sex from her, and she can get them to give her clues. And then she pulls a man there and kind of gets Caitlyn to interact with him. So the next thing that bears mention about the scene, which is why it actually isn't perverse, is that the brothel scene symbologically is actually used to almost make a statement or plays really well with the idea of modesty. And of course, modesty has a component in how it relates to interpersonal relation that you conceal in order to reveal. You conceal the immediate attraction of the flesh in order to reveal the let's say the core of the person, or the attraction of the soul in a sense. So instead of taking a culture into one that is sexualized, into one that obsesses with the material, with the body, with the flesh, you try to take civilization into one that is modest, that is humble in a way, that tries to keep those things to a secret, to a private world, and focuses on its interaction with others onto those things that should be held between people and should not be, let's say, esoteric, because sex is something, of course, that you do that is sacred, but only sacred if you do it in the nuptial agreement, because it is such a great point of revelation to one another that if you do it in any other kind of setting, it just ruins and destroys you. And the show actually works with that, and it works with that really well, because all the prostitutes get masks. Every single person in the establishment, except for Vi and Caitlyn, and the establishment owner, wears a mask. So instead of modesty, they kind of invert that and they conceal the face and reveal the body. So they conceal what is personal, what is kind of essential, what is natural in the person, their face, their being, and instead they reveal the body, the flesh, the lust, those aspects of personality. But of course, they also go in there with the intent of revealing information. So Caitlyn wants information revealed that the city guards, because Silco, of course, let's say, hides himself within the city, and Vi wants to go in there because she wants to reveal information that in the end also comes down to the same thing, that the city guards, because Silco hides himself from the eyes of the enforcers. So Vi gets into the room of the brothel owner, and again, behind her, there's these hundreds of masks, or not hundreds, but this myriad of masks. And this also plays, again, very nice with this kind of concealment, revealment, and of course plays on the whole I can be what you want, kind of the depersonalization of people during prostitution thing. So again, it really does a brothel in a non-perverse way, where it kind of symbologically puts out or puts up this critique of the brothel and what it is. And then Vi comes out of the brothel and she looks to the side and she sees Caitlyn interacting and flirting with a prostitute, and she smiles at it. And again, this was written apparently by the author to be Vi kind of being happy that Caitlyn is lesbian, which, if that was the only use, that would have been kind of sad. But again, luckily, the way the show turned out, these things are only there if you want them to be there. And what you actually also see there is she looks into the room, and Caitlyn is now at the center of the room, and the entire room is arranged around her. Because Caitlyn, and this is something that Vi hasn't known so far, but Caitlyn is a huntress, and of course we know that from Caitlyn's flashback, where she was out hunting, and she was very, very good at it for a young girl. So she is a huntress, and she is now in the middle of the room with a lot of Artemis symbolism around her, having conquered this world and being outside or being back in her element, being back on the hunt. And the next time we will see her, she will be the one who saves Vi. So she has now overcome her, let's say, her ignorance, her shock with the Undercity, and she has now gone back into her own element, come out of it as a huntress, and she is now on the hunt. And as you can see, also, if you listen in the episode, if you listen to closely to what Caitlyn is saying, she actually tells the prostitute about her life in Piltover. So instead of pretending she's a prostitute, she actually pretends that she's a customer, but she has found something else that the prostitutes want, and that is a life that they never had. And this is also just a really nice way of kind of resolving that situation, because she isn't subdued by the Undercity. She isn't prostituting herself. Instead, she finds something that people from the Undercity want the way Vi wanted her, but on her own terms. And the way she does it is she strikes at the heart of the girl, because she strikes at something that the girl never had. And with this, the girl starts obsessing about her and presumably giving her information, because, of course, afterwards she knows where she can find Vi. So very well done scene. And again, incredible that they did a brothel scene with so little perversion in it. And then they did a sex scene, and it's the same thing, very little amount of perversion. So, of course, here they could have done a bit less. The beginning, kind of Mel kissing Jace, it's already very well done, because also kisses on cinema, they can be contentious. I would put it this way: there are two kinds of ways you kiss people. One is an intimate way, and the other way is a public-facing way, a way which you would also do it in public. The kiss between Mel and Jay is more public kiss, which is good, because those are the only kisses that you should show in cinema, because otherwise you get an element of voyeurism in it, and again, you kind of pervert your own creation. But they don't do it. They also show it from behind, so they don't focus on the kiss. They actually focus on Mel kind of grasping Jace, embracing him, which is why a lot of people think at this point that she is taking control of him, because the way she moves her body, she kind of takes him in, slings herself around him, and then they kind of start going at it. And there's a scene where she's kind of laying on her back, which they could have cut out, because they will already have a scene with Jace's back where you can very clearly see that they are having sexual intercourse. And that is, of course, the more important part, because you have to know, and this is actually the interesting thing about the scene, you have to know that they're having intercourse, which is, again, this is things I've never seen them done that way. Usually you don't need to show sexual intercourse. This one time they actually had to, and they even show it mostly tastefully, again, except for Mel kind of lying there in that way. Maybe the beginning of the other parts, you just see Jace's back, and then you see other non-sexual parts, which still make you realize what is going on and convey the whole thing very, very well. So A+ on that. But before we get into the real spice, we have Victor forsaking a girl. And the first thing you think about that is that, oh, Jace is finding love and luck and love and kind of being happy, and Victor is being kind of stopped and the one who doesn't get into the limelight, who doesn't get the girl. and who's kind of frustrated. But oh boy, it gets better. Because Victor starts coughing up blood, and the blood is in front of the hex core. And then you have Jace and Mel having intercourse again, I think, for a short part. And then you have the blood being taken up by the hex core and impregnating the hex core. And that overlaid in the spiritual realm of the hex core, you then have parts of Mel's and Jace's body meeting, hands grasping into one another, hands grasping the sheets, the faces, all that stuff, whilst the hex core impregnates, or whilst the blood impregnates the hex core and merges it together and kind of goes into there. And this actually has an additional piece of symbolism, which I don't know if they intended that, because it would be absolute madness in 2021. But of course, Mel and Jace are different races. He's Mediterranean looking and she's African looking. And the hex core and the blood are also two different worlds coming together and forming into a new one. Whilst you have the act of conception, you also have conception being shown. And of course, this is kind of Victor's conception, which will birth his later tragedy. And this entire scene is closed out, and it's closed out by baptism. So you have the conception, and then you also have the birth, which, brilliant use of symbolism. You actually needed the sex scene there. 10 out of 10. This is the first time the show really goes above and beyond. So then you have Jinx Baptism, and it's also really well done. You have Silco preparing her for it, kind of going through the baptismal regeneration himself to show her what is about to happen, and then she baptizes her, and she goes underwater, and she closes her eyes, and the screen fades to black, and another perfect piece of symbolism happens, and that is that she is now underwater, but now a pink eye opens, of course, the pink eye being an in-show part of symbolism, symbol that the show set up for shimmer, for this unnatural element, and of course she is also being baptized into the unclean waters instead of, let's say, real clean baptismal waters. And the next scene that follows this will actually have a merging between reality and fiction, because you will have the real band Imagine Dragons being in the fictional show. So it's a kind of an almost, if you want to look at it that way from the show's perspective, almost mythical scene, because let's say Imagine Dragons, who are these from the show perspective mythical beings, because they are of course from our world and not from their world, make an appearance in the show. So it kind of overlays these two worlds coming out of the baptismal waters of Jinx. And in some sense also the future and the past blend together a bit, because Jinx will have pink eyes in the future, but she will not actually have pink eyes at that point. It's just a more or less a foreshadowing in this scene. After that, Sevika plays with tarot cards. Here it's Death and the Magician. And let me just say a few things about tarot cards, because my Catholicism has already been put into question on this channel before, and of course I understand why. I think if I just did a tarot reading here, many people would write me off, but I'm not going to do that, because, well, I suggest you shouldn't do that. I will dedicate a video to tarot cards in the future, and which is going to talk about why they are disordered and what their value is and what their value is not, because there is a certain value to tarot cards, and it is similar with values I've already talked about, the Baphomet, those kind of things. They don't have, let's say, an intrinsic value, but they have a value as a storage. And the problem they have is that they are disordered. So maybe to give it the short rundown, tarot cards hold most of the West's legacy of our symbols, and a lot of these symbols are absolutely great. but tarot cards also pervert them because they have a kind of a symbolic overload. Many of the cards have more than 5 or 6 symbols in each card, so they all connect them in some way, which kind of throws up these, let's say, uncertain connections. So even if you don't do them, use them for divinatory purposes, which of course is a false use anyways, just kind of contemplating them can already lead you astray, because within themselves they do have an order, but it is not an order that is actually based on anything. It's just a cultural element that came out of the medieval world, and it can be used to connect us to the medieval world, because if we study them and just study the symbols individually, we can once again get symbolic understandings of these things that we had in the medieval world. But if we go beyond that, and if we want to, let's say, read them like a book, for example, or read the story of the major and the minor arcanas, and so on and so forth, that is to the point where they actually draw you away from the light of God and draw you into a, let's say, a forest of uncertainty, which also gives them the reputation of being a portal into the demonic, because this is a road that can lead you down fairly easily into kind of, let's say, a perverted state of mind. In this case, perverted really meaning disordered relative to the logos. So yeah, I'm not going to talk about the 2 cards here. Death and the Magician, they could mean many things here. I'm just going to talk about the use of tarot, and that is, I'm okay with this kind of use of tarot. The first thing they do is actually they redesign the cards, which is really nice. And because, let's say, if you just take the symbols without wanting them to mean anything more that tarot can, let's say, offer you, then, in my opinion, use of tarot in movies is okay. Again, I do enjoy the movies. Now You See Me, the first movie, the second one is terrible, but the first movie, which of course are kind of, let's say, very obvious Masonic propaganda, but still very enjoyable. And the first one also features tarot cards, and of course each of the people's tarot cards kind of relates to their character. And I find that use excusable, because it's only a surface level look, and I think if you explicitly and only use them on a surface level, then they're okay. And if you kind of start getting deeper into that, then you start sabotaging yourself in a sense. A really nice piece of symbolism, again, which is kind of like the swing. It's just small, cute, but it's good, is the Keyhole Skull, the windows that Victor appears in 2 times. They look like keyholes, but they also look like skulls when these the shadows of the characters are in them. So they appear both times in connection with death. So again, just a very nice use of symbolism there. Also something that you would see symbolically exist in Piltover, of course, with its kind of thematics of unlocking secrets, because they're a city of science and progress. But then being turned by the context of the characters into signs of death. And both of those cases, the death is also due to the unlocking and science that goes on in Piltover. So first time around, it's Victor's death, which of course is because of the fumes, and the fumes are of course because of the industry that Piltover developed. And the second part being Sky's death, and her death is, of course, because of Victor's working on the hex core. But we will also get to that in a bit. Very nice small thing is Jinx getting the same drink she got from Vanda when she was little. It's in the same cup. It's a nice little detail, and I think it's quite self-explanatory, so I'm not going to talk about it, but it's nice. Then we have Vi and Caitlyn going into the deepest pit of the underworld, so kind of this dark place where even the demons don't go, or I guess the people of Zorn don't go. And here they find friends, insights, and cures, but also betrayal and danger. And again, kind of a good piece of symbolism going into the deepest, the darkest place, the darkest mist. And there the world is tough, but we also have the going into Vi's childhood. We also have a person from Vi's childhood showing up, and we also have the cure. It relates a lot to kind of symbolisms of seeking for the Holy Grail, in a sense, where the Grail Knights usually also kind of go into the deepest, darkest dens of the forest, and then they are confronted with the deepest, darkest pits of their personality. So it has this kind of psychological symbolism really well done. There's also a little tower here, which will falter shortly after, and bury monsters below it in its rubble. And then we have the second time torches are used symbologically. And this time, Jinx is lighting the torch as a desperate cry out for her sister. And again, of course, she lights the torch, so she wants to reconnect to her past at this moment. And at the same time, you have Vi and Caitlyn entering the Enforcer's rifle chambers. This is, of course, overlaid. You have them enter tunnels that look like rifle chambers, but then you also have the Enforcers putting bullets into their rifle chambers, which foreshadows, on the one hand, that Vi and Caitlyn are going to be Enforcers in the future, but it also sets up what is going to happen, and that is, of course, the Enforcers and the Enforcers' rifles being kind of the undoing of the dreams of the people of Piltover. And what they're going to do next is kind of not of Piltover, I'm sorry, of Zorn. And what they're going to do next is kind of shooting any idea of redemption into the face. And that is when Caitlyn and Vi meet Jinx, and Jinx feels betrayed and replaced by Caitlyn. And we also have the moon showing up, I think, for the first time. Maybe it showed up before, but I didn't remember correctly. The moon is, of course, a universal symbol for longing, one of the oldest symbols in the West, but I think used that way everywhere around the world. Very common, very standard, and here it is present because, of course, Vi is longing for Jinx, and Jinx is longing for Vi. Or I guess Vi is longing for Powder, or however you want to see it. And with that, we're getting into the third part of the show, and it has a very nice piece of symbolism of the eyes, and here we will also cover Silco's eyes. So when Jinx looks into the broken mirror, her right eye is missing, and her right eye is also usually covered by a strand of hair. Now, this is also part of her in-game character design, and I don't think that it was intentional there, but it was kind of fortunate that they did choose to cover the right eye because it works really well with the symbolism here. And if you see later at the end in the finale, when Jinx made her choice, her right eye will be completely covered as well. And the right eye, again, symbolism is age-old. I mean, this was so deeply ingrained in culture that actually when you look at Egypt, the real symbols, the hieroglyphics of the left and the right eye, in this case the left and the right eye of Osiris, actually stand for the sun and the moon, the exterior and the interior, the exoteric and the esoteric. And the right eye is the interior, the moon self being mirrored, the symbolism of the eyes is mirrored with the symbolism of the hands, because the right hand is the place of order, the left hand is the place of chaos, but the right eye is the eye of the moon, and the left eye is the eye of the sun. And here the connotation is kind of that Jinx doesn't do introspection. She runs away from her trauma, and in this scene specifically, she blames Caitlyn for her own problems, for her own trauma, for her own upset, and sees herself replaced by Caitlyn again. If you want to see the show through a lens of where the thing between Caitlyn and Vi is sexual. The show enables you to do so, but to get to the deeper themes, you actually have to look at it through a lens, through a specifically non-sexual lens. Of course, also Vi, seeing Caitlyn in the previous part with a face that is with powder in the background and with a face of what she imagines powder to look like in the future, which is very close to her mother. So she also projects powder onto Caitlyn in some sense. So Jinx's fears aren't completely unwarranted. And this dynamic is way better than if you just see it as a kind of point of sexual interest, which, again, kind of ruins the story actually in many parts because scenes stop making sense. It also doesn't make sense that the way that Vi calls Caitlyn a cupcake, because it only makes sense if Vi calls her a cupcake first to make fun of her because she's soft, and then later kind of impromptu changes the definition of it as Caitlyn is so sweet, because it wouldn't make sense that Vi calls Caitlyn sweet before she rescues her, but still behaves the way she does towards Caitlyn, in which she does up until that point. So, yeah. But here, again, we have just the eye symbolism, and here we can also talk about Silco, because in his case, of course, his left eye is damaged because he also has a damaged concept of order. And around this time, we'll also explicitly be told that he flooded the lanes with shimmer. So it wasn't something where we might have said, okay, maybe he actually, organized crime has this element where they actually sometimes keep even more crime out. And maybe he was doing that or something like that. No, we specifically know he flooded the lanes with shimmer. And of course, if Silco has been characterized at this point already in a way where we understand, or we can understand or guess at the motives behind that, and that is that he believes that the strong will be able to resist the temptations of shimmer, and that this will just be something that hurts the weak. And while he's not weak, the people he cares about aren't weak either, so what does he care? And with that, we also kind of see how his right eye is perverted. He has been born in a moment where the strong were dominating, the weak were Vander almost killed him, and that has flown into his left eye and has marked it. And now it is this artificial thing. It has to be kept alive by shimmer itself. So very, very nice use of symbolism again. Okay, this is also something quite interesting. I think at the start of the 8th episode, there might be a reference to Akira in there, the throne. I don't know. I don't like Akira. I think it's most of Japanese stories are thematically worthless, and I think Akira is one of those. But I guess it's in there. And well, aside from that, of course, Akira is very pretty, very well animated. So I guess. But also at the end of the scene, you have Mel's painting depicting the necklace of the dead princess she saw at that day. And this means, or this tells us actually something about her, and this is that she paints to process her emotions, because she puts that painting there, and, and it has this kind of blood and the necklace scenery. And this kind of brings us back to an earlier point where after she felt abandoned by Jace, after they had intercourse and she woke up without him, that she started painting, and she started putting blemishes on Noxus to kind of get through her own feelings of abandonment, because she, of course, feels cast out by a family, abandoned by Noxus. Now she feels abandoned by Jace, yada yada, very simple. But again, very nice, very well done. It's, of course, that it's simple means that it's good, because it's very hard to craft simple things. Another part of symbolism that the show sets up for itself is that in Victor's flashback, we have him setting up his boat and walking after his boat, but he can't keep up with it, and that brings him to Singed. And now we have the kind of the playing out of that in a later scene, and that is that by using the gifts that Singed gave him, he is able to outrun the boats at the harbor, using the shimmer and the hex tech augmented with shimmer to cure his body. And somebody else who also shows up in the scene where he puts up his boat and creates his boat is Sky, and there's kind of a divide between them where he is apparently not able to play with them. We don't know if he doesn't want to, but we definitely know that he can't because she is kind of climbing around everywhere. And he is just contained to his cane, so he plays with his boat. And she, of course, not in that scene, but in the scene after that, will turn up again. And where, let's say, he couldn't be with her, she can't be with him this time. She, of course, embraces him, tries to save him from the abomination that he created in the cave that he went in when he parted from her. In the beginning scene, she tries to redo the connection, but the hex core is, let's say, and again, remember that the hex core is a she in this sense, and she is Victor's bride because he already impregnated her, and we had this symbolism very, very strongly, and she's a vicious bride, and she destroys Sky, the human girl who actually loves Victor. So again, really well done, perfectly played together. His kind of, let's say, the way he gets set up in the series and the way he will end up. And then we get into the second time the show just goes above and beyond. I guess in this case, it's not things that I would have never imagined even being possible, but it's just an incredible performance, and that is the finale. So the finale has many things. It has the third appearance of the torch. And again, this is the only times the torches really appear. So very, very on point here. And this time the torch lines up after the line I always knew, or with the line I always knew you'd come back. And after the line, we've always been sisters. Nothing is going to change that, something like that. So, of course, the scene escalates. Everything goes kind of badly. Watch the show. I guess you should have watched the show at this point. But yeah, on the symbolic front, we will see as Jinx has, as Silco has died and as Jinx has made a choice, she picks up fish bones. And of course, fish bones is also one of her in-game weapons. But they actually reframed fish bones in a very nice way. And that is, of course, fish bones mirrors the underwater sea monsters that Silco admires. And it is his dream. It's the sea monster, the shark that raises up from below. You will see later in the shot of the rocket that the rocket kind of comes up from the depth of Zorn, and it hits Piltover and kind of enacts Silco's revenge. So in many ways, fish bones really is Silco's weapon, and is the choice she's going to make. And the moment she makes the choice, I would say, and this could just be with all the things in the symbolism here, I've been pretty certain. This, I think they actually did it because they've shown such a deep understanding of the way symbolism is used, and the schools of symbols they're drawing upon are all connected to that scene. So I think they actually use it, and they also put a pause here. And that is, they put a pause where Jinx has on the left side of her the city, which is, of course, a structure and a civilization and ordered. And on the right side, she has the moon, which is round. And, of course, round, if you've seen my other videos, the ring being chaotic in a sense. And the moon or round objects do have that symbological component generally, and the moon definitely does because it is the Lord of Dreams, and of course dreams are also chaos in its more symbological sense. So she gets to make a choice because of course she has a rocket. She can shoot the rocket either at the city to her left or at the moon to her right, and if she shoots at the city to her left, she chooses her left side, and that is kind of Jinx. And she will be in order at the moment as she as she puts the as she pulls the trigger, because she knows who Jinx is, because she was Jinx for so long. So she will know who she is, and she will commit to Jinx, and she will commit to her left side. Or she will shoot at the moon. This would be to undo Silco's dream, to revoke him in a sense, renounce him in a sense, and to really shoot for the moon, because in this case, she would orientate herself to her right. And the moon, of course, being a symbol for longing, she would be longing for her being in a proper order again, being not this broken creature, but powder again. And we'll get to that in a second, but this would mean that she misses the weapon, she just shoots it away. The Silco's dream never comes to a close. And it also would mean for her, that she is now at this very moment in disorder, because she doesn't know who Powder is and who Powder is anymore. And it would just mean that there's no closure for her. She would still be searching. She would still be just as lost, just as broken, just as vulnerable. Or she just forsakes all of that, shoots at the city, and of course the choice she makes is she forsakes all of that. But they use the symbolisms in other ways too. So, short side note, while the rocket flies, Mel puts off her Noxian ring as she chooses peace, which is a very nice symbol there. But more importantly than that, the rocket will cross the moon, and it will cross the moon from two perspectives. One from the side perspective, which is kind of Jinx's perspective, where the rocket is laden and symbolic for Jinx's longing, for her suffering, for her emotions, for all her dreams, her hopes, everything on that rocket. Of course, Silco's dream also, the part of Silco that rubbed off on her, the part in where she really feels Silco to be her father. So all of that is kind of carried on that rocket in that shot. But we also have the shot from the perspective of Vi, where we have the moon kind of very central, and the rocket cuts through it in a clean cut, because for Vi, the shot of this rocket destroys everything. It destroys her longing, it destroys her dreams of being with her little sister again, and it condemns her to the life that they're going to lead, to the future that we of course know they're going to have in game, and that is that they're on opposite ends from one another and that they're constantly clashing. So from her perspective, it cuts through the moon. And then we actually have the wizard tower, and it's such brilliance because, of course, the rocket as it flies, it's powered by hex tech, and it mirrors in this shot, it mirrors the hex tech beam that we've already seen from the hex tech, from the hex gate, being the wizard tower under control. This wizard tower has gotten out of control. So instead of the wizard being evil and using the tower for his evil things, we have more of a let's say Goethe dynamic, where the wizard is overcome by his creations, which we of course have in Goethe's The Wizard's Apprentice, and we also have in Goethe's Dr. Faustus. And here we have the shot from the coming from the wizard's tower, and of course bringing forth the destruction that the wizard tower was inevitably going to bring. So they actually managed, because I think they had to put the hex gates in there because they're part of League of Legends lore, but they actually managed to do the wizard tower in such a way that it makes sense, that it actually works symbologically. So hats off, absolutely going above and beyond. Just checking. No, okay. So those are all the, let's say, all the specific scenes. And then let's also just come to a few other interesting things about the show. And I guess I already talked about the lesbianism is really there only if you want to see it. It's a bit more, let's say, jarring in the third part. In the third part, there are kind of like moments. I think, let's say, the most condemning one is where I think Vi or Caitlyn says it. Is this ever going to work out between us? And the other one says, oil, and Vi says oil and water. And the question is, well, what is going to work out? Because when you talk about a friendship or even a close kinship, kind of a companionship, you don't say, is this going to work out between us? So I guess this is, again, kind of, I assume the writer that wanted them to be lesbians kind of writing that scene, and this time, I guess nobody of the censors kind of noticed that and put a new spin on that to kind of make it work in a different scene, or they just didn't know how to rephrase it, or they actually just said, okay, it might work for a personal relationship, for, say, companionship, so we're not going to bother with it. Other than that, again, it's really only there if you want it to be there. Then something that actually comes from that is a coincidence, so not a coincidence, but a coincidence, is that, of course, again, the whole show seems to be heavily orientated and pay a lot of homage to A Tale of Two Cities. But where A Tale of Two Cities has a lot of black and white, this show has a lot of blue and red. And this works, let's say, if you know the wider League of Legends lore, because, of course, blue and red are the two team sides for League of Legends, so you can get, again, the, let's say, black and white dynamic in there. Back in the old lore, where you had kind of good Demacia on the one side and bad Noxus on the other side. Demacia, the light side, was blue, and Noxus, the dark side, was red. And the way blue and red also play part in the show is, of course, for example, Jinx has her finger painted blue and pink, and I think this is also part of her in-game champion design, but in the show it actually works to showcase her kind of broken identity between Jinx and Powder. Of course, the blue eyes and the pink eyes, which is getting played out a lot. Then the Hex tech being blue, but Chem tech being pink. So you have a lot of this blue and pink or blue and red duality in there. I think also, and again, I don't think that this is actually, or that this just happened, that this really is just a coincidence, and also kind of gives a nice little homage, nice little payback to not just League of Legends, but also A Tale of Two Cities. And the final thing I want to kind of touch on, because this is also something that goes so terribly wrong in most of modern storytelling, is people don't know how to write male and female characters anymore, because the male and the female elements are very poorly understood, and this show actually breaks away with that. So let's talk about that for a moment. The one character that's a bit contentious is the mother of Mel, the senior, what the family call again? Medada. And of course, in her case, a father would have worked better, because you already have a lot of this father-daughter relationship with Jinx, Vi, and Vanda and Silco. And kind of because also the conflict between Mel and her now mother also interplays with the conflict of Jinx and Vi with their adoptive parents. Having a father there would have kind of drawn the parallel home much more. And also the things Mel's mother does are kind of more masculine in, let's say, their appearance, kind of drinking and having what you call it, I guess, prostitutes also. Is of course something that you kind of would expect from a male character. It still works on the layer we're going to discuss, though. And that is the most basic thing you have to keep in mind when you write male and female characters, is that in character writing, unless you, let's say, do specific things, which probably shouldn't do either way, is that male characters embody the male element and female characters embody the female element. And this means that male characters are active and are driving the ordering of the show, so the progression, the loosening of entropy, if you want to, or the progression of entropy, if you want to put it that way. Just the timing. And female characters are receptive, of course, something I've also discussed on the channel before. And we actually do have this here. So the main female trio, Vi, Jinx, Caitlyn, all of them are passive story elements. And this is, we sadly think in our modern world, which only sees the male element and doesn't recognize or value the female element, that being passive in a story is a bad thing. But in this character, you see that this is not a bad thing at all, and it's really well done with them. And that is, of course, because they take on the passions of three parts, and that is Jinx and Vi, of course, take on the are impregnated with Zorn, and Caitlyn's mate is impregnated. And I mean impregnated here only in a let's say in a sense of parallelism, or in a symbolic sense. Even, it's never played out, of course. None of the characters are impregnated. And she is, of course, pregnated with Piltover, because Jinx is the insecurity, the loss of Zorn, the unfair destiny that the Zornites are being born into, their rebellion, their resentment, all those things. Vi is the grit of Zorn, its endurance, its ability to get through everything, which, of course, she goes into prison, and the prison is very hellish, very well made, where the prison gates really look like an entrance to hell. So she goes through hell, comes out the other side, because she kind of is this grit, this endurance of Zorn. And Caitlyn, of course, is Piltover. She is, at the one hand, very assured of her belief in justice and of righteousness, but she is also an investigator. She kind of tries to solve the mystery, which, of course, is Piltover's other theme, right? They are the governors, the righteous ones, or the self-understood righteous ones, but they also uncover mysteries, and all of this is present in Caitlyn's character. And they are not driving forces of the action. They are not driving forces of the plot. Instead, the plot happens around them, and it happens for them in many cases. And again, Tale of Two Cities also does this well in some regards. The daughter, whose name I've forgotten, she is, of course, the central thread that keeps all of the book together, in a sense. But it also happens all, in a sense, for her. So it's kind of, she's the female element. It happens for her. It is, as I said in the discussion of the male and the female element, the male element puts the order into the female element, and she beholds it. And all the female characters, all the female main characters, behold their order. And this is also similar for the female background characters. So Mel, of course, is a really well-written traditional female character. She is able to use the weapons of the woman, which sadly understood nowadays to be sexuality, but actually are sociability, in the way she interacts with the other counselors, which is very nicely done. She's also a caring female. You see her vulnerable side. You see her protecting her vulnerable side and only letting those near to her whom she thinks she can trust and who won't abandon her. Very well done. And then you have other female characters as Civica and as the mother of Mel, whom would have worked as male characters as well, but actually do work as female characters because they are both also experiencing a passion in these, or they're passive characters in these parts. And that is, of course, the Civica is the right-hand woman of Silco, so she always reacts to his doings and is being actualized, is being put into action by him. And the mother of Mel reacts to the things that are happening in Noxus, and also has a, let's say, somewhat of a motherly component to her, because she says that she would, I think, tear down the world if it meant to save her family, which is more of a motherly instinct than a fatherly instinct. So it still works out in the end. yeah, I think with that we have covered most of the, let's say, the symbolic side. Of course, there's a lot in there. So this is not exhaustive at all. This is not a review. There are other minor issues that I'm not going on here, but all in all, it's one of the best things I've ever seen in television. Very surprising that this came out from where it came out. I mean, League of Legends has always been very good at scouting talent, but usually scouting talent in the modern world means that people are very clever, very young, but very bad with kind of the Western tradition. So it's interesting that they so flawlessly incorporated things like a proper understanding of, for example, modesty, and just played with modesty in an actual good way. Yeah, I think that the biggest critique I will still put in there, because it's just so unnecessary, and it's the one time they actually completely messed up their symbolism, and that is the scene where Jace visits Mel's mother, and I understand what they're getting for, where she is kind of presenting herself to him naked to show that she is not afraid, and naked and blind, so in a sense vulnerable, but she also controls the situation. They could have done that, but they mess it up in how they visually convey it. It's messy. I didn't understand the scene the first time I saw it, because she suddenly says that about that one general that when he was blind, that he was stabbed, I think, or something, like killed when he was blind. So she projects her blindness onto Jace, which isn't conveyed very well symbologically. And kind of, let's say, when is one allowed to be blind and when one isn't. And of course, the other one is just the shots, which are the shot of her leaving the bathtub, which is just perverted and unnecessary. The shot of her being open-legged in the bathtub, which is just incredibly indecent and unnecessary. So these scenes could have been gladly cut out or should have been redone. I mean, again, they could have worked. They could have worked really well. But here they just dropped the ball for whatever reason. Other than that, they never really have a blunder like that. And again, it's just a phenomenal show. So yeah, thank you for listening to this. I know it's a bit longer. I hope you enjoyed it. Kind of seeing a look into symbolism in visual media, visual storytelling. And I'll be back with just, let's say, the standard content for the channel in a bit. Bye-bye.